closer to you. That's what we gotta do. All right, we are live for another episode with Diabetes 180. This one is a part two. So, if you were, I should say, present for last week's live, you know what we're talking about. Otherwise, it's right there. We're talking about animal protein and its inferiority, is how you say it, to plant protein. It's definitely a hot topic today because animal protein, yeah. Being better or worse than plant protein, something that I know we get a lot of opinions on, especially in our high protein environment. Everybody's all on protein and the low carb, the importance of getting your carbs, your proteins in. Seems like protein is almost like a health food these days. So to say something like this, I know it's controversial, I worded it on purpose to kind of, spark the conversation and help guide us to some very important points when it comes to overall health. Because when you're thinking about health, it's multifaceted, right? Everyone has different goals when it comes to health. Some people are trying to build muscle, particularly with protein. Others are trying to reverse chronic diseases, right? Others might be trying to, prevent Alzheimer's, or lower their blood pressure. Maybe you're healthy, but your focus might be just living as staying healthy and living as long as possible, which I think, Carme, right, is probably what most people want in the end. To stay healthy, get healthy, and to live long. And what we are finding from last week's lives and continuing into this one, it makes sense to judge the superiority of any health component based on its ability to promote long-lasting health, right? We're not talking about summer plan goals. We're not talking about weight loss goals. We're not talking about even getting your blood sugar normal for, because even having normal blood sugars, Carme, doesn't really always paint the full picture of whether or not you're healthy, right? I could stop eating food and just drink water and my blood sugars would be perfect, but is that sustainable?
No.
Right? So we're talking about sustainable ways to promote health and long-lasting health, right? So, all right, we have a lot to talk about, Carme. And for those who are new to the channel, my name is Louis Burtis. I'm physician assistant and diabetes reversal health coach. Most of you know already Carme, my wife, who is on with us for most of our lives. If you have questions, please let us know in the chat. And I always tend to forget to let everybody know. We like your input. We like to know what you guys are thinking, what that you are thinking, right? That's always a good thing. That you're an active observer in these channels. Feel free to ask questions, right? Hey Joe, how's it going? Coach JJ with us. Let us know where you're calling from. If you just want to say hi, we always like to greet our regulars. So yeah, don't hesitate. But yeah, this one's going to be a good one. And I think we want to get into it. Carme, our focus is going to be speed too, because I know there's a lot you can talk about when it comes to animal protein, and the risk factors that when it comes to chronic disease. But I want to keep it simple. So that's going to be the goal number one. And short is goal number two. So I want to be done by, I should say at the least, I don't want to go longer than 35 minutes.
Okay.
Probably even go to 30, because I think what we're going to end up doing is cutting this into about at least 3 parts. So this is part 2. There's going to be a third part for sure, maybe even a part 4. All right. Because I think this is something that we really need to engage and talk about today.
Go slow and be clear.
Yeah. I know Carme likes clarity. She's going to tell me if I'm not being clear. Right. So that's your job. And also help us moderate the chat. All right, so let's go ahead and go to the first point. Now, I should say this first. Also, before we go into the goal is going to start with biblical perspective, right? What does the Bible say about animal protein? Because a lot of people don't know that there's actually the Bible has some to say about it. A lot of people say, what does the Bible have to say about animal protein? Well, it's in there. So there's going to be a biblical perspective as well as a scientific perspective in our study today. Okay, so let's go. All right. So first off, in the Bible, um, anyone familiar with the story of Genesis and how we were created? Let us know in the chat if there's something that is new to you. Like, oh, I really didn't know much about the story of Genesis or how we were created. I would say, especially if you're watching in America, most people know the story, but just this is a very important part of the creation story of the Bible. That God said, "I will give every seed-bearing plant on the face of the earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it, they will be your food." So what kind of diet then is that, Carmen? Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a plant-based diet.
Plant-based.
There's an original diet given to man. There
Maybe
were
like a
almost
raw vegan.
almost a
Mm-hmm.
raw vegan diet, right? Because they weren't
Yeah.
even cooking.
Yeah.
But the original diet given to man was one without animal products, animal
Mhm.
protein, right? And or animal
The main
byproducts,
idea.
right? That's the
Mhm.
idea. Was the original diet given to us. And continuing on this biblical perspective, it's interesting. This is probably maybe a little less known fact that eventually in the Bible in Genesis, God gives permission for mankind, for humanity to start eating meat. I don't know if anyone knows when that was in the Bible or what time that happened, but I will tell you. In Genesis chapter 9, verse 3, we get the story of what happens after the flood. After the flood, Noah comes out the ark. Uh, God commands Noah and his family, every moving thing that lives shall be meat or food for you. So now we are given the permission to start eating meat, start sustaining ourselves on animal foods. So this is when meat enters our diet, sometime after the flood, according to the biblical Genesis story of our origins. So we have them in the beginning, we're majority plant-based, and it's somewhere along the line, God allows us to start including animal foods in our diet. So following so far, I'm not losing nobody, hopefully. Oops. I'm supposed to go to the next slide. All right. So now another interesting fact is, people lived really long in the Bible, and I'm actually going to come off and talk about that. So, like, we all know stories in the Bible. In Genesis from Adam, people lived a very long time, right? And it's very interesting though. Right after God allows mankind to start eating meat, you see the lifespan start to drop. Right? Were you aware of that? Do you know that?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So lifespans start to drop. And, so we have all the time, we kind of see Adam, Methuselah, then Noah are living pretty long. And then there's a drastic drop in the age of man. I like to say that there's a reason, even spiritually, why this happens. It's almost as if God says, like, I don't want you, man, if mankind lives as long as they're intended to live, I'm gonna have to flood this world again. because you guys are just so wicked. I'm going to shorten your lifespan, and part of that method maybe, I don't know, do you think maybe the fact that we were allowed to eat meat started to shorten our lifespan, even that in itself? Or it was just that, the word of God, but lifespans start to cut short at that time, same time correlating to eating meat. But even if you were to look more at a more scientific perspective, right? If you look at prehistory or the study of our ancient human history, they did something interesting. They examined paleo-poo, is what they call it. Paleo-poo is basically the fossilized feces of our human ancestors. And they did this to basically examine what did their diet mainly consist of? And surprise, surprise, their diet mainly consisted of plants. Okay. Um, and according to the fossilized feces, 100 grams I should say over, if you look at the highlight, over 100 grams of fiber a day. How much fiber do you think we get nowadays?
Well, judging from how we used to eat before, almost nothing.
Yeah. Now most recommendations are 30 grams a day. But according to studies, 95% of Americans are failing to get even 30 grams a day. And there was a time in our history when we got 100 grams of fiber, right? And the bulk of your poop is basically a good indicator of health, right? They even say that your size of your poop indicates your risk of colon cancer. Did you know that?
Yeah, you tell me.
So you're never gonna get cancer ever. She is never gonna get cancer. This looks like something that would be floating in our toilet. But yeah, I mean, I'm curious how you guys are doing on that end of things, right? How are you flowing these days? Are you putting out quarter pounders or nuggets? If you're putting out quarter pounders, good for you. I don't know if you guys are brave enough to let us know in the chat. Say, hey, I'm a quarter pounder girl. I'm a quarter pounder man. All right. If you're nuggets, then you need to work on that. Eat more fiber. Yeah. But yeah, the fiber intake of our human history, our ancestors, indicates how our bodies were designed. So if you're looking at Bible perspective, a human history perspective, it seems that our bodies were made to mainly subsist on plants, right? So, and then of course we highlighted this last week, the fact that the people who are living today, so now we kind of fast forward to today's time and we look at, and just say, if you're like trying to figure out what's the secret of long life, what's the secret of longevity, we got to look at the people who are living long. And when you look at their zones, they call them blue zones, where people are living the longest on planet Earth today. And you look at their diets subsist again of majority of plants. Right, one of the longest living society in Loma is actually right here in California. I don't know if anyone's aware of that. In Loma Linda is almost 100%, based on the fact that they eliminate all animal products. But the other societies like Okinawa, Japan, they might eat animal products or meats, I should say, once a month, if that, right, or very very infrequently, a few times a month. But yeah, it shows. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So we got a brave one here. Audrey says, I am not a nugget. All right. She's a quarter pounder. Anyone else brave enough? Let us know. I'm really curious. But, no shame, of course, if you're dropping nuggets. We can work on that. So why do animal foods put us at higher risk? That's what we're trying to ask, right? We're going to break down now. And this is where you got to bust out your pens and pads and take some notes. My goal is that when we look at these components of animal foods, we can understand why. Because I'm always a why guy. I don't like people just telling me, don't do this or don't do that, or you need to do this. I'm more likely to do it if I understand it. Are you like that too?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the goal, to help us understand why. And again, this is going to take more than just one night. All right. So bear with us. We're going to get down to every aspect we can to inform, so we could all be informed together. So our first study, and what I'll do is basically highlight studies as published in PubMed or National Institutes of Health. Are you familiar with the National Institutes of Health? I mean, it's basically a very well-known, well-trusted source for medical studies or research, all peer-reviewed. So all the studies on here have been reviewed by medical personnel and people who are specialists in the field of science that is being published. So this particular study is interesting, and it highlights, number one, the first thing I want to highlight on why animal-based foods or animal proteins are inferior to plant proteins is how they stimulate mTOR, okay? How they stimulate mTOR. And this study kind of highlights what a 25-year study of mTOR. And first, before I even go into it, I should explain what mTOR is, right? Yeah, no, Carmen's like, what the heck is mTOR? Well, nobody knows and nobody cares what mTOR. So mTOR is basically, I guess the simplest way to describe it is it's an enzymatic pathway. So you have different pathways in our body that produce different compounds that guides different procedures, chemical reactions. So mTOR is a very involved pathway that is very active all throughout our life. It's good when you're a child, because what mTOR does is it speeds your development. Okay, so because of mTOR, a child goes from baby to an adolescent, right? Very fast. Unfortunately, though, it doesn't turn off once you've reached your peak adult age.
Okay.
So the same engine of development as a child becomes your engine of destruction as an adult. So mTOR is linked to aging, basically what ages you, what causes your body to decline both mentally and physically. It's mTOR's fault, unfortunately. So there's a lot we could talk about on the science of this, but just understand that mTOR, and especially in our adult stage of life, it ages us. This study actually even highlights that inhibiting. So scientists even say, because there's a lot of studies on longevity. People actually believe that we can solve the problem of death and live forever. You know that, right? But we Christians, we know better than that. But but it's interesting though, because there's still a lot to learn on this topic of longevity because of their studies of trying to prolong life. We understand that mTOR is one of the things they're trying to zero in on, slowing down, if not stopping aging. And scientists say that inhibiting mTOR is the best validated, as in scientifically proven way to slow someone's aging. They've done many animal models and also studies on the human body, and to show that if you slow mTOR down, you can slow aging down.
So I'm sure they grab all those people who don't age.
Yeah.
Like those.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So where you're going to look at centenarians, people who are living long, and see, what's the difference between them and those who die early. And mTOR is definitely very much
talking
involved.
about those people who stay in a childlike body.
Yeah, that might be interesting too. Yeah. Oh yeah, those. Yeah. So yeah, mTOR is something that we need to pay attention to. So in this next study on NIH, mTOR and the nexus of nutrition, growth, aging, and disease, they highlight something very interesting. That mTOR is hyperactive in up to 80% of human cancers, right? So up to 80% of human cancers are active in this metabolic pathway called mTOR. So yeah, that means I'm not sure what the 20% is, but hyperactive in 80% of human cancers. And it also is present and active, okay? And mTOR is also slowing down mTOR when they actually work on these models, animal models. They are able to extend the lifespan of animals, improve their cognition, function, physical and mental, prevent hearing loss, prevent artery dysfunction, so reverse heart disease, prevent tendon stiffening, anyone feeling stiff in their tendons. All of these things have been proven when slowing down mTOR. And another, I guess, I feel like we need to explain what mTOR is a little more. Another way to describe what mTOR does, and it's also very similar to the number 2 so I should go ahead and let you know that in our next 10 minutes, when we're done with mTOR, we're going to talk about insulin-like growth factor. So there's 2 things that are very like yin. No, I shouldn't say yin and yang. They're almost like just cousins, twins, right? And what they do is they keep the cell phone from going in rest mode. That's the best way to describe it. So imagine you have this cell phone. Well, yeah, you're using a cell phone. Yeah. Imagine you have the cell phone, right? Okay. Or TV or computer, and you never turn it off. Is that good or bad for the device?
It's bad.
Right. So why do you turn your phone off? Why do you put it in rest mode? Because it helps rejuvenate, keep the battery from dying quick, right? It resets things, right? It allows apps to update, right? It keeps the phone or whatever device, computer or TV, it allows it to survive or last longer. So what we do when we fast, right? That's why we talk about fasting. Fasting puts you at a rested state, right? It actually triggers another process called autophagy. Anyone heard of autophagy? I know you used to study a lot about autophagy, you in Kenya. Autophagy is basically putting your body in rest mode, allowing the cells to rebuild, reorganize, get rid of the proteins that are misfolded and damaged. It recycles things, right? It puts your body in reset. mTOR shuts that off. mTOR says, nah, turn it on. It turns you on, and it focuses on growing and building the body cells instead of resting them. Does that make sense?
Yep.
If I've lost anybody so far, please let me know. Okay. I like feedback. I like feedback. Let me know if I'm lost anyone. Okay. So it just makes sense then when you look at these you know, results of slowing mTOR, what happens. Now, of course, you're probably thinking, okay, what does it have to do with animal protein? Well, what stimulates mTOR the most, according to studies, right? This is one of them, published in IH, is the Western diet. What stimulates mTOR is the amino acid profile of animal-based proteins. Nothing stimulates mTOR the most as much as this. Okay. Now, of course, you could fast from all food to slow down mTOR, or you could fast from certain amino acids. And this is amazing when I learned this. So a lot of people who talk about protein talk about it being a complete protein. Ever heard of people say that? You know, animal proteins are a complete protein. So they kind of brag that I'm getting all my protein in, and you gotta, and when you're vegan or vegetarian, you get incomplete proteins. What they basically mean is that when you eat an animal protein, it has all the amino acids present. Whereas we're going to talk about this a little bit more later, plant-based proteins are you have to get them in a variety of foods you're eating, right? So rice and beans are complete. Rice alone is not.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
So eating beans, it might have an amino acid or here or there missing. Okay, where meat, right, and it is very close to what we are, right? We are meat, so we have the same amino acid profile as the animal-based foods, and I think that's his advantage, right? Wow, Joretta, thanks for sharing that. That it makes sense to you, having had cancer twice. This is definitely something to pay attention to. Right, we're going to talk a lot about cancer. All right, so yeah, I hope I'm curious as we go forward in this. If any of this is something that is new, let us know. I would like to know if this is new to you. I always like to know if I'm bringing something that's new. So let me know, please, as we proceed. If hey, yeah, this is new. So I know that I chose the right topic, I should say.
Eating meat in moderation, slow it down.
Oh, who said that?
Audrey.
So Audrey asked, "Will eating meat in moderation slow it down?" Yeah, so it's a very good question. So obviously, so it's not all or nothing for sure, right? So if you take, I think
But what is moderation though?
I think the best thing, if you think about moderation, is taking breaks from eating meat, right? You know, maybe people go on fast from meat, maybe they go a month or two or weeks without meat. It does have an effect to slow down mTOR during that time frame. But yeah, and or if you're eating smaller amounts than in certain times, yeah, the more you eat, the more it triggers mTOR. So it is
every time you eat, it triggers.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. So well, this should also help you think about things a little bit. So when you look at this, I'm not sure if we could see it as they. Let me blow this up so I can see it here. Okay, yeah. I was going to maximize it. Yeah. All right. So if you look at this, this is the amino acid profile of whey protein versus soy. Okay, and this is something that highlights a very important principle. It's the dose that makes a poison. It's the dose that makes something a poison, right? Amino acids, proteins in animal products or animal proteins are not poison in themselves. But the problem is when you have certain amino acids, there are certain amino acids that trigger mTOR more than others do. One of the worst offenders being leucine. So I highlighted the amino acids that are known to trigger mTOR the most: isoleucine, leucine, methionine, and valine. These four particular amino acids are very strong in their ability to trigger this process called mTOR, which is linked to aging. Leucine being the strongest one. And if you can see, you know, of course, soy versus whey, soy has less of these amino acids than because it is from a plant-based source. Whey is a good example of other animal proteins having more of these particular amino acids, causing more problems because they stimulate mTOR more than plant proteins would. So the dose, Audrey, is in the poison, right? The poison, the dose makes the poison, right? So the more you have, and I kind of say it's best to be safe and eliminate it altogether. Because I don't know about you, I would rather lower my risk of chronic diseases, especially, cancer, if it's linked to 80% of cancers. I like to limit my consumption to zero. But everyone has to make a decision for themselves, right?
You start slowly, you get there.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Coach JJ's says she suspects cured and smoked meats trigger more mTOR. We're going to talk about cured and smoked meats probably a little more on other processes, but an mTOR specifically, I'm not sure. I can't say. I can't say for sure. But there are processes where how meat is prepared makes a big difference on its risk. All right. But mTOR, I'm not sure. Another thing, so the next thing we're talking about now is insulin-like growth factor. Insulin-like growth factor is something that, what is it?
You say it very fast.
So I need to slow insulin-like growth factor, right? Have you heard of this before? Is that something you've ever heard of before? I talked to you about it. Okay, so maybe to our public, to our audience, those watching, it's new. It's going to be new too. But insulin-like growth factor, again, is very similar in its job as mTOR. Its job is to stimulate growth, hence the name growth-like factor. It takes the body out of rest mode, right, and puts it into building mode, right? So yeah, that's the best way to describe it. It takes it out of rest mode, puts it in building mode, and just like mTOR, insulin-like growth factor is stimulated mainly by the amino acid profile of animal-based proteins. Right, so the certain amino acids, and this is actually so strong. This effect is so strong now that I'm thinking about it, that you think about, a lot of people know about the benefits of fasting, right? Especially if you're into health and longevity, you know the benefits of fasting. But do you know that if you fast from those specific amino acids, it's almost as if you're fasting altogether. You get the same benefits. So fasting from meat, basically, or animal-based foods, and especially those sources of these amino acids, it's almost as if you are fasting from all food, because the body's saying, "Oh, well, there's nothing to build with, so let's put it on rest mode." So it's amazing, right? So I especially when you think about autophagy and cellular cleaning, and the fact that calorie restriction or fasting is the number one thing we know can extend life and promote longevity. And so you're telling me I don't have to starve myself. All I gotta do is stop eating certain foods, and I could keep eating and still get the benefits of fasting. It's craziness. Yeah. So yeah, and it's all about the profile. The dose makes the poison. Gerard is making a good point. My dose will be 0. Also, I haven't eaten meat in a long time. Will fasting with intermittent fasting program help? Yeah, intermittent fasting still is something we benefit. We encourage people will benefit from, even if you're not eating animal foods. So this is interesting. Centenarian. So when you look at the IGF-1 is basically the short way of saying insulin-like growth factor. IGF-1 in those who are living to 100 years or more is lower in those who are living 100 years or more. So when you look at the blood of those who are living long, IGF-1 tends to be lower in their blood. Right, which is really interesting, right?
That includes the mTOR too.
Well, no, IGF-1 is a different fact.
Okay.
It's a hormone versus a whole metabolic pathway. IGF-1 is a hormone,
but they didn't talk about the mTOR.
mTOR is more of a pathway. So it's not like you can, I guess you could probably measure mTOR activity levels, and yes, there is studies that show mTOR activity is lower in those who are living longer. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Coach JJ is making a point here. Insulin growth factor can cause muscle atrophy and also neuroinflammation, which leads to conditions like multiple sclerosis and unfortunately dementia. Yep, insulin growth factor is indicated in a lot of chronic illnesses, and it's one of the biggest ones being cancer. This study highlights that the lower the IGF-1 you have, the lower chance you are to get all types of cancer. Which actually makes sense, because if you What insulin growth factor does, and to go a little deeper into it, and I'm almost time up. Time is almost up. I got more, but basically, cancer cells have receptors,
Mhm.
and those receptors are basically what determines whether they grow and spread.
Mhm.
Those receptors, some of those receptors on most cancers are insulin-like growth factor receptors.
Mhm.
Their job is to, basically be stimulated by insulin growth factor in the blood, streaming through the blood, and that insulin growth factor is what makes them grow, and not only grow but spread to other tissues and metastasize and invade other parts of your body. In other words, if your insulin growth factor is not high, it's not likely to stimulate the growth and spread of these cancers.
Yeah.
There was actually a time before chemotherapy. So before chemotherapy, what surgeons would do with advanced breast cancer is they would actually remove the pituitary gland. That's how important they knew. If you want to slow or stop the spread of cancers, it was important to slow the spread of insulin growth factor, right? To slow it down. So again, it's the dose that makes the poison. It's not that insulin growth factor is bad, and no, but it's in excess, and we know that the amino acid profile of proteins causes the body to have a more stronger or higher level, I should say, of insulin growth factor floating animal proteins, through their blood, which makes sense when you look at the risk of cancer being lower when you have low levels of IGF-1. Another way to actually, I think there was something else that I'm missing here. Another thing I was supposed to put in here is that the fact that those who survive cancer, it might be a later slide. Those who survive cancer are more likely to live longer if they have low levels of IGF-1. So if you're a cancer survivor, anyone watching, this is another reason why, to limit the consumption, if not eliminate the consumption of meat and animal-based proteins, because what you're doing now is you're lowering the very thing that can trigger the spread or revive those cancer cells.
Cancer.
Yeah. So, JJ, those are dark days. Okay. Or these obviously thank God that medicine advances in their options, right? So I'm not sure if there was a partial removal or how they did it, but it's amazing. When you're looking at advanced cancer, it's almost like, well, what can give you the most time? And they decided, basically an operation on the pituitary gland was important. But going forward, this is a really good illustration, okay, to understand insulin growth factor, all right, and it's linked to disease and cancer. If you describe insulin growth factor like this, like a guy who really, or a kid who really likes to build, okay. So this is actually from Dr. Greger. Hearing this illustration, it really stuck with me. Insulin-like growth factor, the hormone is like a kid who really likes to build. If you're a kid that really likes to build, are you going to choose or get excited more over a what's the word? Pre-assembled building blocks, or completely disassembled building blocks? Which one?
It will be more
excited. What's gonna excite you more? A pre-assembled kit, right? Or one that's completely disassembled, where the building blocks are already kind of a lot easier to put together, I should say.
I guess the pre-assembled.
Yeah. So, don't think too hard. It's very simple.
But the question is like, because if I like to build, then it's already built already.
I see what you're saying.
No fun in it.
There's no fun in it. Okay. Yeah. Well, it's like growth factor is a lazy kid.
Okay.
Right? I guess if you're a lazy kid who likes to build, you're gonna be excited over the pre-assembled kit, right? If you're lazy, you're gonna look at that pile of Legos and nah, I'll play with that another day. So that being said, animal protein is like the pre-assembled kit, right? So when you eat animal proteins, insulin-like growth factor, the kid gets excited because he's got amino acids that are already ready to be put together, ready to be disassembled and put together to build. Whereas plant proteins, because they come from different sources, it takes a little more to put them together. Insulin-like growth factor is not triggered as much.
So when you say plant protein is come from different sources, like
soy,
the rice,
beans,
the beans,
yeah.
quinoa.
Guess what? Everything has protein in it, right?
Yes,
every plant food has some amino acid profile, right? So it's not like you're not going to get your gains in the gym, or you're going to sacrifice strength, which we talked about last week. You can be just as strong, just as fast, right? You look at these competitors nowadays who are vegan or plant-based, and they're not sacrificing their physical function because they're eating plant proteins. However, you are sacrificing your longevity when you're eating animal proteins.
Okay.
Right. That's why I come to the conclusion of it being inferior. So so I think we actually went through that already.
So you finished with the building stuff?
The building illustration, yeah. Do you have a question about that?
That was it?
Yeah, you had a question about?
Oh.
What were you gonna say?
No, I don't know if I understood the last part.
Oh, which part?
Yeah, you say the last part again, just for me then.
Okay.
Maybe everybody got it.
Okay,
go back to the illustration.
Go back to illustration, okay, to make sense. Yeah, because I think illustration really is important to kind of understand. So the kid which insulin, we're kind of equating. We're equating.
So the insulin, the IGF-1 got so excited that they saw the pre-assembled amino acids. So then what he did with it after?
That's why he just starts then. So I'm trying to explain it simply, but obviously it's more complex than that. What happens is it's mainly at the liver. The liver starts to produce a lot of insulin-like growth factor with the incoming assembly kits, right, of amino acids. And
which is from animal protein.
From animal proteins, right? The liver starts to produce a lot of insulin-like growth factor and to go into building mode. Whereas when you're eating plant proteins, and the liver's like, well, we're not going to be as excited. There still is, of course, we're still growing and developing, but not to this extent where the dose makes a poison, right? The dose makes poison.
Then when you have a lot of that, then that's when you have the possibility of cancers growing and all of that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So we have some comments here. Let's go back. JJ says, thank you for this informative session. All right. Awesome. Glad you're enjoying it. Renee, our friend. All right. I don't see her often. Does this happen in overly processed plant protein like our delicious Impossible Burger? Great question. Man, like just for time's sake, I can't go into details, but it is more likely. Yes. So studies show when you're eating plant proteins from actual wholesome sources, there is not going to be a mass trigger, an upsurge of insulin-like growth factor. But if you take something like soy isolate proteins that are from processed veggie burgers, veggie meats, you can get an upsurge of animal proteins. Of insulin-like growth factor. That being said, Renee, it's still not the same as animal proteins. It's still not the same. Animal proteins is much more significant in their ability to trigger insulin-like growth factor to go into building frenzy, right? And Renee agrees with you that, yeah, she was confused too. So did I confuse anybody else with a Lego illustration? It was supposed to make things clearer, but apparently it made people more confused. Then we have another comment. I had never before considered that we started out with plants only and the correlation with the permission to eat meat and a decline in years lived. That's crazy, right? Yeah, it's crazy. So even looking as a Christian, from a biblical perspective, it makes sense. It's almost as if I'm also gonna say it's almost as if our bodies were designed for plants, and animal protein is kind of just allowed, right? So that if we have too much of it, we decline. Our bodies were made for plants. Yeah.
Some other slides. Huh?
Yeah. So I hope that's clear with the building blocks, right? The building blocks were made to make things clearer of insulin growth factor. But again, we talked about the lower chance of cancer when you have low levels of IGF. We talked about in this study, let me see here, anti-aging meets cancer chemo prevention. Cancer survivors are more likely to live longer, when they have low levels of IGF. I just said that, right? I think Renee had another comment. Not you calling my government out for being absent. Yeah. You're not calling nobody out. I'm a little over time, and actually, this is our last slide, I believe, or one of the last slides. This is a really interesting study. So, this really interesting title: "Meat and cheese may be as bad for you as smoking." So, this actually was a study that was conducted by a team of longevity researchers, right? Some really big in the game of longevity, really well known, right? And what they did is they followed thousands of a random sample of Americans for that were 50 years and older for up to 18 years. They followed these from 50 years and older. And the results were really interesting. So those who were 65 and older with high protein intake were twice as likely to die from all causes.
And this is animal protein.
Yeah, I was going to say you just took the words from me. And they're 4 times more likely to die from cancer if they have high protein. So according to the study of thousands of Americans, those who are 65 and up, specifically with high protein intake, they were twice as likely to die from all causes, and even 4 times as likely to die from specifically cancer. And then when they realized that, they said, that's interesting. They went to another level and started to separate the groups of the thousands between those who had plant protein and those who had animal protein. And guess what? The result, those who were twice as likely to die from all causes or 4 times as likely to die from cancer was limited. It was limited to those who had high animal protein intake. So those who had high protein from plant-based sources did not have this result.
Wow. Okay.
To me, that puts it to bed. I don't know. To me, that puts it to bed. But there's still more to talk about. There's still more to talk about. This subject gets even deeper. On our next live, we're going to talk about how animal foods increase diabetes risk and other chronic diseases. So we kind of picked on cancer a lot. And we talked about, of course, other things like cognitive decline and artery dysfunction, things like that, and just slowed aging, or say speeding aging. But next week, we're going to talk about diabetes risk and other chronic diseases and how they are linked to animal-based food intake. So I hope you guys learned something. And as we always try to do, we always try to give something away. So I know a lot of people might still be struggling with eating more whole food plant-based diet. This is our free meal plan. So you could scan the QR code there and start enjoying a guided tour to the whole food plant-based world. And we have a lot of other resources in there too. My email is there if you want to ask questions and need support. And then of course, if you have if you need support specifically on adopting a whole food plant-based diet, we specialize in diabetes, but we do work with anybody who's just wanting to adopt a whole food plant-based diet and is struggling. There's a consultation link in the description section above this video on Facebook, below the video on YouTube. All right, we do have another question before we close. Thoughts on eggs? Wow. Okay, you gotta give us that one at the end. But yeah, egg protein, the same thing. It's a very strong stimulator of insulin growth factor. We have studies that we could share if you're interested in those studies. Message me privately. I can send you the studies on eggs, but very strong stimulator of insulin growth factor and mTOR. Right. So yeah. That's it. All right. Beloved, as always, I pray above all things that you may prosper and be in good health, even as your soul prospers. Don't miss next week's